So for removing the top fuel cover here, you've got 2 screws down here. They're T25s. You've got 2 T25s in here, left and right, which I've already undone. You got to undo this as well if you have an Evo tank lock on. This helps you get that off. And you've got 2 T25s to the winglets. And then back here hidden, you've got 2 T25s, one on each side, and then one straight down right there. Can you see it? There it is right there, behind the BMW logo there. That'll allow you to get the whole top off of the bike. This is our view now. There's the airbox in full view. We've unhooked this T25. I've also undone the T25 on each side. One is the intake, one is just fake. And then now we're gonna use the T40 to take the upper crash bar, loosen that up to get to the T25 on each side. It's right here in order to get the side panels off. There's one more right down here you'll need to get. And then these are also hooked on the inside as well. So inside of here, you'll have to unhook 2 inside as well that hold this panel on. So once those 2 are done, your radiator guard may be a little looser, but it's just part of the process. All we're doing is just trying to get to a bolt that's up there behind the air intake. Oh, Porter's making an appearance. Hey, buddy. Okay, so we have we've unhooked these 2 pieces here and this one here. I usually put the bolts back in the hole so I know where they go when I'm done with them. So now this kind of side is off. All the T40 came off. Put the T40 back in here into the upper frame. This piece is off. We can probably leave this piece intact, I think, and we'll just be able to take this off after we get this last T25 out. And then once this comes off, we'll do the other side, and then we can get to the air box. Okay, so the next step, we've got the air intake, air filter housing exposed. But it appears to get to the clamps that we need to remove to get the air housing off, we need to also remove the fuel tank. So that's going to require first removing these plastic circles, and then we'll proceed with doing the fuel tank removal. Okay, so we've unhooked these brackets, and in these 2 here, we've got the top unhooked. So we're going to slide this back and remove it. I'm not going to go too much details on this whole tank removal bit. JVB Productions has a really wonderful video on how to tear down the external fairings and plastics and tank removal on the GS. So definitely watch his video. It's really concise. I'm not a good editor. He did a good job with that. So just watch his for this part. I'm just kind of trying to do this quickly, so I'm not taking a lot of time to shoot a lot of scenes. Okay, fuel tank is off. Trying to work on the air filter intake box. Whew, okay. That was a lot harder than I expected, and I truly hope that I'm not at a point of no return. Okay, so the GS is naked. A few notes. So JVB's video does not include how to remove the air filter housing. That was not in there, so I had to kind of figure it out myself using the Haynes manual. So a few things. Now this is specific to the GSA, so just keep that in mind. First thing is you'll need to use this here to remove these clamps very, very carefully. I may even break them putting them back on. That's from the throttle body. If you remove the clamps from the actual air filter housing at the top there, it won't work. So you've got to remove them from the throttle bodies themselves. You'll need to pull fairly hard on these. These are on the back of the rubber piece of the housing. These come off. You'll need to disconnect on one side this by pushing this in and pulling down. You'll need to use the pliers, disconnect this as well. And these are on both sides. These are just on the right side. Then to get the mouths through and out, you're going to need to loosen up these 2 screws right here. You can get to one by going through a hole right there, and then the other one's is right there. And then this is a breather hose for the coolant, so make sure you zip tie this off, because if you leave this sideways, ask me how I know, coolant will come out this little hose here. Other than that, I did not actually disconnect the keyless and such from this. I just took the tank right off. You may want to do that instead, but that just kind of leaves all this hanging. This is off the. This is all off the fuel, off the tank. This is the top of the tank, and then I did not take these guys off because I really didn't need to. So I'm going to take some microfiber towels and just put them in here just to keep those from getting stuffed full of crap, and then we'll proceed. And here's the top of the shock right there. One thing I don't understand or don't realize or can't figure out yet is the is the ESA plug. Kind of snakes back here somewhere. I haven't found out where it terminates yet. So I need to figure that out, probably by reading the instructions. Okay, so now we're going to use a T50 on the top of the shock and the bottom, which is right there, and get that unhooked. Then we'll have to figure out where the ESA cable goes. You can see it come out of the front of the shock there, in the little silver bracket, and it goes back towards the right side, but I can't tell where it terminates. I had to utilize the heat gun on the lower for about 2 minutes on both sides, 1 minute per side, in order to get this moving. It's finally moving now. Whew, that's a lot of work. The manual from Touratech doesn't mention this, but the Haynes manual does, which is to use a jack stand to take the weight off the front wheel. And then obviously it's using really high strength thread locker, so heat it up like I did. And then you're removing the bottom bolt first, then the top bolt. They actually said to disconnect the ESA first, but I still can't find it, so I'm just proceeding with undoing the bolts first. I still haven't found the ESA termination, but to get this spring out, I'm gonna have to remove the steering stop, which is pretty easy, just four screws there. No big deal. But lifting this up is pretty easy, and you get just enough, but it's just right there, not able to clear it. We have found the ESA termination point, so right, let's see if I can get this. You can see right there, there is now a loose zip tie right there to the right here. I get to cut that. Now that the cable is moving freely, this ESC cable, if you pull this back, you can see right there, there is a termination. So we'll need to use a pick and terminate there, and that's where we plug in the new ESA. So right to there's the right cylinder head, right above it, pull this back, and right there is the spot you care about, right there. Well, here is the front shocks compared. So on the OEM shock, you have a very standard linear compression ratio. On the Touratech shock, you've got a gradual compression ratio going from tight to larger. Significantly larger reservoir. Obviously on the OEM shock, there's no adjustability on the preload. And then you have these high-low compression adjusters. And then this, nothing at all. I think this is aluminum and this is stainless steel. It's a monoshock. It's very well built. Look at the bushings, are incredibly thick compared to the BMW one. Weight-wise, estimated about 11 pounds, and about the same, honestly. Actually, the BMW is about 2 pounds, 1 or 2 pounds heavier than the Touratech model, so that's pretty interesting. All right, well, let's get it installed. So I thought I'd walk through this before we actually install it. Let's walk through the remaining steps here. So obviously we're going to clean this area up a little bit. We're going to install the shock in place, connect the ESA back there on that running wire down there where the red is. That's something different, but that's where it's going to go, is where the red is. And then once the bolts are in and Loctited down with medium to high strength Loctite, then what we'll do is basically build back. So we're going to start with the air filter housing, put that back in place, build everything up around it, tighten these bolts on the side, these carriers here, get the coolant reservoir back in place, top it off with some distilled water because I did lose some coolant, and then reaffix the fuel tank and basically work backwards. So I may film certain parts of this, but for the most part, this is going to be pretty much working backwards the way we came in. Pretty interesting to see the bike like this, though. I think it's a cool view of things. It's amazing to me how high the front frame is. Incredibly high compared to the rest of the bike. If you step backwards here, it's up there. Definitely goes up there. And if I can do this kind of job, anyone can. This is not rocket science. For reinstallation, I put the shock in, and then what I did was I started by threading 5 or 6 threads on the bottom, and then I lowered the jack ever so slightly to finally get this hole to line up on the top. It took a little bit of finagling, but I eventually got it to where it was even completely throughout. Just be sure, of course, not to cross thread, which is something I do quite often. Okay, so we've ran, this is the Touratech ESA unit. Ran that back under, you slide it back or forward, and then you just take the original OEM ESA bit there and slide that right in. Nice click. Now I've got some excess here, so I'm going to manage this and just keep it out of the way. This is a bit thinner than the OEM ESA cord, so I'm not quite sure if this will end up staying inside of those little, there we go. I'm not quite sure if this will end up staying in those little hooks. See here, these little hooks. So I might actually zip tie these in. They're already kind of coming out. So, but there's two of them. So I'm going to zip tie around those, and then I'm going to use a zip tie and manage this up out of the way somewhere. And while you're installing your $4,000 new shocks, you're already in here anyway, so go ahead and put in a new air filter. Here's my, this air filter has 2,000 miles on it, lots of off-roading, dirt, sand. So seriously, you're going to spend $4 grand on shocks. Spend $12 to $18 on an air filter and throw that in the box. I'm actually going to grab the air compressor, the air pump, and blow any sand out of here that's present. Good time to actually just blow sand through here and blow sand in here in general. Might as well. All right, so now we have the air intake housing is back on. The cables are rerouted. Zip tied that back up. Everything's pretty much the way it should be. Had to reconnect this guy, tighten these brackets back down. Now the moment of truth of putting the fuel tank back on without dropping it. Dropping this would cost about $2 grand with the tank plus the painting again. So don't do that. When you put it back on, you've got these 3 hoses. These are actually different sizes, so it's hard to screw it up. And then you've got the fuel connection here, which is still leaking a little bit of gasoline. I'm trying to stay on top of it. Once that's done, reattach this guy here, and then we will start kind of feeding all of the trim pieces, which are all over the house, back on top of the bike. So let's proceed. Don't forget, whenever you're done with this, that there is the this guy here you'll need to reattach as well, back to its rightful spot. Something to keep in mind there, but yeah. Okay. All right, we are done. Well, done with the front suspension shock. So here it is. High-low compression is at the default setting right now, and everything should be squared away and out of the way. Looks good. It's the newest looking thing on the bike. Even after 5,500 miles, there's just dirt everywhere in this thing. I mean, all the mud and stuff that I go through. Yeah, I think it looks good. Let's just give it a quick power on to make sure that there's no error codes that flash. Looks good, huh? Let's see if we can. Yep, ESA responding. And yeah, perfect. Okay, guys. Well, thanks so much for watching. And a sneak peek is that we have the rear shock to do next, which will be, I think it'll actually be easier than the front shock. Because in the rear shock, well, that's for another video. Okay, guys, have a great night, and thanks so much for watching.